The chariot.
Thanks, darling. I'm going to do one about tarot.
Save it for the recording. Give away the good goss now.
I will save it for the recording. I won't give away the good goss. Pick a card. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the 7 steps to reading the tarot. So where to start? Okay. Step number 1, everyone has their own way of reading the cards. So definitely our way is not the only way. And well, to be honest, it might not be the right way for you. But we'll share what we know and then you can take it forward if that fits with you. And we will share some thoughts at the end about how you could develop the right way for yourself. Right. Step 2. For us, it seems that the cards aren't good or bad. So what do we mean by this? Well, when we've done readings, the clue as to whether the information in the tarot card is intended to be read positively or negatively is actually more to do with where they appear in the spread and less about the traditional white book meaning. So over the years, we have definitely noticed a pattern where even the most positive cards can become blocks if that's where they have popped up in the spread. So what do we mean by that? Okay, so traditionally the Sun card is a positive card, but for us, when we have had that card show up in a blocking position or something that suggests this is what we fear, it's often been because the shadow interpretation of that card is what the meaning should be. So for example, with the Sun card, when it has appeared in a blocking position, it's been because we've perhaps been overconfident about a situation, not taking a step back to really look at what is going on, and that overconfidence is actually interfering with things. So that's what we mean by, for us, the cards are not good or bad, it's where they appear in the spread. So we've talked a little bit about positive card being a blocker, but the same seems to be true of those so-called bad cards. So what do we mean? Like the 10 of Swords, the Tower, those very traditional, oh God, look what's turned up kind of cards. So if a bad card appears in a placement maybe reserved for some good news or taking action, it definitely doesn't mean that all is lost. So for example, in the case of the 3 of Swords, traditionally that carries quite a heartbreaky kind of meaning to it. So if a 3 of Swords turns up in a taking action placement in the spread, it could be inviting you to perhaps not take things too personally, or as has been the case for us, it might mean that actually you have 3 difficult choices that you have to make in order to move forward with that action. So that brings us towards step number 3, working out the spread before you shuffle the deck, means that you can interpret the meanings as either positively or negatively, depending on what the placements will be. So thinking about what spread you're going to use while you're shuffling will help you work out whether there will be an action placement or a blocks or a fears placement. Now, there are hundreds of spreads to choose from. Equally, you could just make one up. But we have found that deciding how many cards that we'll have and what the placements will be before we start will bring the meaning of those cards into focus. So, step number 4, asking the right question. Now, asking open questions is better for tarot readings. So what do we mean by that? Well, it's not that yes or no or potentially other types of closed questions can't be answered by the tarot, but we have found that framing the questions around how can I move forward, or what am I not seeing about something, those kind of questions give a richer meaning to the cards when we compare it to questions like, when will I do this thing, or should I do this thing? So asking open questions means that the spreads can be more interesting. Now, this works better for tarot cards because of the layers of interpretation that you can get from a tarot card. And by this, I mean that there are astrological associations with the cards. The artwork, you can get an interpretation from the picture that's on the card. The number of the card, all of these things have those kind of layered interpretations to them. So asking those open questions can be a route to get that richer picture. Number 5, the direction the cards are facing tells us whether this is external world stuff or internal world stuff. Now, we understand that not everyone wants to work with those upside down cards, but if you do want to, interpreting the cards in their reversed position can be a bit tricky. Now, and I think this is probably what puts a lot of people off. So for us, we have found that an upside down card usually means one of two things. Now, either this is how we feel about ourselves, so it's an internal reflection, and this means that there is some internal work that we need to do, or it means it's something that we haven't got quite right and we need to spend more time learning or reflecting on it. And cards that are facing the right way up usually mean that this is something that is going on in the external world. For example, it's how we are operating in the external world, or it's about other people, people that we are interacting with. Now, step number 5 about reversals. I know that traditionally reversals have included interpretations such as the opposite to the card meaning or the shadow side of the card meaning. But because for us, cards aren't good or bad, it's all about where they are in the spread. This is why we interpret reversals in the way that we do, because for us, that's how it was showing up. We really went down the rabbit hole of trying to work out a block position and it's upside down, and we were just getting ourselves into so many weird different inception level layers. It was just tying us up in knots. And it was only when we realised, actually, cards that are upside down have got nothing to do with what's going on out there. It's about us. It's about how we feel. And the light bulb just went on, and it just made interpreting the spreads so much better and so much richer, especially for other people when we sit down and we explain that this is our approach, and everyone gets on board with that. So for us, reversals are all about how we feel, which brings us on to step number 6, court cards. Okay, so for us, the people cards aren't always other people, and other people aren't always shown by the people cards. So for us, using court cards and where they show up goes back to the spread again. So for example, if we've got a placement in the spread for some people, or how we are interacting with the external world, for example, the card that shows up there, that is going to shed some light on who this is. So even if it's not a court card that shows up in that placement, there'll be some energy of the tarot card that relates to a person that we will know in the world. And it's that. So that's what we mean by other people aren't always shown by the people cards. So when we get court cards, we choose to interpret them to do with the other meaning of the card. What do I mean by that? Okay, so traditionally the court cards in the tarot deck have been described as people, very descriptive as well. So you might get a dark-haired woman or a red-haired woman or a grumpy man, for example. But that's not how we choose to interpret them, and we're not alone in that. Lots of people choose to interpret the court cards way beyond their very traditional symbolic of a person kind of meaning. So for example, the Knight's cards, so the Knight, that's a very action orientated card. The Page cards, they are often about inexperience or about messages. Traditionally in the royal court, for example, the page would be used to deliver a message. So often we choose to interpret the court cards more to do with that. With the Queen and the King, this is about a stepping up, becoming a leader in a particular area. That's how we choose to interpret court cards. So it's less about people that we know and more about what is the energy that that card is bringing. Which brings us on to our final step, step 7. So the meanings of the cards are whatever they are in the moment you turn the card over in relation to 3 things. The question being asked, the placement in the spread, and definitely what the other cards are saying. So what do I mean by this? Well, trying to stick rigidly to the book meaning didn't work for us. So we resigned ourselves to the fact that the same card won't mean the same thing every time we see it. And once we worked that out, everything else just became so much easier. Now, the tarot cards obviously come with a book that provides the interpretations for them, and that's a great place to start, but it can also get in the way. So if you rely on the book too much, you might be getting in your own way. So the book meaning didn't work for us. We resigned ourselves to the fact that every time we turned the card over, it was meaning something different. And when we discovered that, we thought we were doing it wrong, when in fact, we were probably doing it in a way that's more intuitive. As we mentioned, the cards have got all sorts of information in them, whether it's the artwork or whether it's the numerology or the astrology. the cards can bring so many different meanings, and depending on where they are in a spread, the card can mean so many different things at different times in different positions. So once we realised that, it was equal parts annoying and liberating, because it was at that moment we figured out that the pentacles can mean emotional stuff, and the swords can mean like money stuff. And this is because there's so much more going on in the card that needs to be considered in the context of everything else around it. So there's the suit, the number, what might be happening in the picture. So any part of the card was giving us some of the answer in relation to the question that we were asking, but also where it was in the spread. So it was way beyond what the book says things mean. So try to let go of the book. And I know that's really difficult to do, especially when you are beginning, because the meanings are whatever they are the moment you turn the card over. So those are our 7 steps to reading the tarot. Now, of course, loads of people will either do it our way or not, and that's fine. The most important thing is for you to figure out your relationship to the cards, because that's definitely going to bring you closer to the right way to read tarot for you. So what can you do to do this? Well, you could start by choosing a deck that you like the look of. So for us, we chose a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. That was the first deck that we ever picked and started to learn from. And we actually didn't buy a book with our deck. We started to write down all of the meanings in our own book. Now, we spent many years doing this through readings and spreads, pulling a card of the day and journaling about what it all means. Now, I'm not suggesting that is the quickest way to build a relationship with the deck. Of course it's not. And so many people do prefer to have the book meanings to hand. But doing it the slow way helped us build a much deeper relationship with the tarot. And it really helped us to let go of some of those blocks about what the book means and getting really bogged down in what somebody else is deciding something means. Definitely building a relationship with the deck is about connecting the meanings to events, to the questions that are being asked, to the kind of advice that you're given. And you can start by pulling a card every day and just seeing how that energy works for you. Now, we discovered that pulling a card every day in the morning and then looking at it and trying to work out what's going to happen in the future was almost the wrong way round for us. Instead, we found that pulling a card for the day in the morning and then reflecting on it in the evening was a much better way to connect with how that card's meaning showed up for us that day. And in fact, if you follow us on Instagram, you can see that we still do this. Even all these years later, we still do this. And we do the same with our longer term spreads as well. We record the question being asked and the spread used and the cards that showed up and where. And then we go back and we check in with that spread to see how that energy has played out for us. And we think that that really does deepen the relationship to the deck. But if in the end this is all a bit frustrating, it might help to think about the bigger picture. Potentially think about building a relationship with tarot rather than concentrating on one deck. So the tarot has definitely got your back, even if you miscommunicate with the decks from time to time. And if you discover that you don't like one deck, swap. You don't have to just have the one deck. Tarot just wants to build a relationship with you, whichever deck you feel comfortable with. So those are our 7 steps to reading the tarot. We hope that you found it useful, and we will see you next time. So that's it. That's our show. If you liked it, give us a rating and review, share with others, tell your friends. You'll find all our contact stuff over at magentaschoolofmagic.com, including our social media and links to the Magick School itself.